We got this story. Did you guys see this story? Liberal Washington Square Park residents say they are afraid of asking for more cops because they don't want to be viewed as less progressive. Professor claims complaints over noisy park raves are targeting young people of color. Oh, that last part, y'all can just shut up. But could you imagine being that much of like a loser that you're like, I'm going to keep living in this city that's being ravaged by crime and murders and it's lawless and people are partying and then,
snitches get
not going to
stitches,
leave.
Tim.
Now, I'm not going to leave or ask for more cops because I don't want people to know.
The Twitter mob will come after you, say you're not progressive enough if you call the cops.
Have you guys ever read or watched The Stand, the Stephen King thing?
Mm-mm.
The Stand is a new show on Paramount, and it's about a plague that wipes out all of humanity. And then people start having dreams where there's like a guy and a woman, and it's like, what's his name, Alexander Skarsgård or Whoopi Goldberg. And they're like, come to this place and join me. And it's basically like the devil and God. And this is really fascinating, and it does relate to this. Bear with me. Because I'm watching it now. I think I'm on like episode 6 or something. And the devil sets up his post-apocalyptic world in Las Vegas, where it's all sorts of just like debauchery and lewd, lascivious behavior. People have jobs, they make the city work. There's electricity and there's food. But for the most part, they're all just drinking and getting drunk and doing drugs.
Debauchery.
And they're like, there's like a scene where it shows a bunch of people having like a massive orgy, just like in this main floor. That's the devil advocating for that. Mm-hmm. And then like the place where God is calling people, it's like wholesome, community-oriented, sunny and happy Boulder, Colorado, and smiles and howdy neighbor. And
Boulder
there's,
sucks, let's be real.
And it's like, I just thought it was interesting that when Stephen King wrote this, the idea of Vegas was evil. The idea of these parties in the streets were wrong, and the orgies and all that stuff was like wrong and sinful and, debauchery. And now it's funny because what's happening in New York is like, I'm not going to say it's exactly the same as The Stand, but there's a funny little thing there. Like, this pandemic hits, and then all the politics, everything is disrupted. Now you've got these raves happening in the park, and no one will speak up because they're all scared. And like, there it is. Like, it's the decay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true that historically people have engaged in a lot of the same behavior that we see today. There's nothing new under the sun. So when you're talking about Vegas being viewed as evil, typically people would do those things, but they also were ashamed of it. They recognized that it was wrong, and they didn't really seek to normalize it as often. But then people had to normalize it, and now that it's normalized, it's actually being promoted as a virtue. If you're against it, you're one of the bad guys.
Well, that's what's strange about it. It's certainly what's happening on the ground, like in Washington Square Park, and in many places where like that toddler twerking in Times Square.
That's so disgusting.
Right. Like, it's like, wow. I mean, man.
And the crowd was cheering it on.
Yeah, I know.
The entire crowd. It's insane.
And this is like, I'm not a religious person, but it's like you watch The Stand and it's literally the devil who's encouraging all of that stuff. You know what I mean? And then this video goes viral of a toddler. She's like 4 years old, and that's happening in Times Square. So like, you got people who moved to the cities after the pandemic, and they're certainly playing it up like they're hanging out with the devil. And then you've got people moving out to the country, being responsible for themselves, being more self-sufficient, not polluting.
Well, and this is also part of what the founders were saying when they were discussing the fact that for the Constitution or any limited government system to work, you have to have a populace with virtue. Do you think the people who are cheering on a 2-year-old twerking are really going to be good at governing themselves? Do you think those people make good decisions? Do you think they behave morally? Absolutely.
Did you guys see the Orlando Bloom thing?
Yes.
No.
Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom, and they're like old. And they like run into a room and they're like, quick, we have to make it work. And then it's like, there's like a year, it's like 2050. And then it winds back to 2021. And it's like broadcasting in 2021. And then like everyone's TVs get taken over and their phones get taken over, which makes literally no sense. And then they're like, you've got to stop the Republicans, their voting laws. They took away our right to vote. And oh no, they're coming for us. Now we have no voice. And it's like, you must pass the Democrats' voter reform bill or whatever. The first funny thing about it is like you don't broadcast to phones that way. That was like the stupidest thing ever. Like someone looks at their phone and their phone just gets taken over. Like, okay, I guess that could work with like Trump's new text messaging thing.
Exactly.
Where it's like,
they'll have Facebook hack your phone. Zuckerberg will find some way to work that in.
I guess it's possible to do through these back doors and stuff like that. But just like the idea that the Republicans who are ending the emergency provisions and returning the voting laws back to normal is evil and like going to create a dystopian future. Man, these people are lunatics.
Absolutely. No disagreement there. and this is sort of what I was getting at. It gets to the point where people become so vicious that they're literally blinded from seeing reality. So classically, it was understood that what intelligence was the ability to see the world for what it is and act on it. And that's not necessarily your processing power, not your long-term or short-term memory, but how clearly you saw the world. And people also understood that the more vicious you were, the more interested you were in pursuing pleasure, and therefore the less interested you were in pursuing truth. So you can't expect these people to come up with ideas that are solid for running a democratic system or any kind of a system when they can't even govern their own lives virtuously.
I got a solution.
What is it?
What we'll do is we will build a very large, beautiful glass bridge called the Unity Bridge. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll encourage all of those who believe in anti-racism and these ideas to come together to stand atop this bridge holding hands. And then, just to prove that we agree with them and support their ideology, in terms of the architecture for a payload of this bridge, we'll calculate 2 + 2 is equaling 5.
Yes.
Then
I
as
love
they
it.
Very
stand,
diverse, the diversity bridge.
Right, and then as they stand atop it, I'm sure everything will be fine using
Yes.
those calculations.
I love it. Let's
And
do
then,
it.
and we'll leave.
That's
They
right.
should just have to live by those rules.
Or-
no, whatever system of mathematics you want to develop works.
We'll do
that.
this. We'll take Elon's rocket. We'll put them all in, as a big sign of solidarity, and then we'll go in the computer and change all the software, and we'll take all instances of 2 + 2 = 4 and change it to 5, and then see how the rocket performs.
So is
Wouldn't
this
it be
an
hilarious if
extension?
it-
Is this an extension of Marsism? I'm just curious. Does this send them all
Yeah,
to
this
Mars?
is 2 + 2 = 5ism. If you believe it that much, how about you put your money where your mouth is?
That's right.
When
I
we
love
look
it.
at New York City, we see a city that was one of the most prominent, one of the most beautiful, one of the most authentic, one of the most grassroots cities out there
it
in
was
the
no
United
Chicago.
States.
Talking
Used
about.
to be,
Chicago.
Get
When?
out of here.
used to be,
When?
had elements of
We're
it.
asking for a date, Luke.
Listen
Come
here.
on.
Listen
You're
here.
not skirting around
No.
this.
Listen here. Listen here. It used to be something that used to represent authenticity.
Maybe.
But it has been absolutely destroyed by big government, and whether it was Giuliani, whether it was Bloomberg, whether it was Dinkins, whether it was de Blasio, they have absolutely ruined it. Why? Because they started to intervene, take over. All the small businesses that were able to succeed there no longer could succeed. It's only mass corporations. People are being fleeced. More and more of their wealth is being taken away. They were locked up more than any other place in the country, and that's why now they're partying. They're having crazy raves in Washington Square. And some of the people who don't want to rave, who are annoyed, who are acting like, some would say Karens, they're like, hey, I'm paying almost more than half of my income to be protected and served, and I'm not being protected and served at all.
Yeah.
And then, and I think everyone, even the ravers and even the Karens out there, they're waking up like, hey, this was a really bad idea.
Nah, the
that's my
ravers don't
I-
have money.
But
So
can
what
they see
happens
that
is
far?
the business owners, the homeowners, the property owners are paying. Meanwhile, the people who are broke are just marching and partying through the streets and just trashing and smashing. Who would want to live there?
Well, exactly. What happens is the incentive structure becomes misaligned, and so people who don't see into the future and aren't responsible move into these cities, and the people who are actually responsible and take care of themselves and frankly do everything for everyone else leave, and the entire thing collapses.
Like to Gulch?
Oh,
Is that what's happening?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the reference.
really?
No.
Who is John Galt?
Oh, John Galt. Galt. Yes, of course. Ayn Rand. My favorite.
I was worried
Ayn
there for
Rand.
you.
Yeah.
I like, wait, hold on
My
there.
favorite book, Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, all the people who produce leave.
Yes. No,
and then
it's true.
civilization
They are.
just crumbles.
I'm very happy I left there. I was barely there even before that because I was traveling all around. But I'm so much happier. There's not just taxes that you save, but so much stress. The environment is so much better outside, and just life in general is worth living when you're not always smelling soiled milk, where there's not cockroaches,
Spoiled milk.
where there's not rats, where there's not people, that just throw garbage all over the street.
Yeah.
And I go back, sporadically sometimes, and it's horrifying. Like, I was conditioned to live here. Like,
Right.
this is a crap hole that is filled with junkies. There's garbage everywhere. I mean, the services that the city provides are absolutely insane, and it's only going to get worse as there's an estimated 8,000 people being held up that are homeless in Midtown hotels that are about to be released because the city is about to stop paying these hotels to house 8,000 homeless people. And the city also announced a $2.5 million program that will be handing out and giving out homeless people $1,250 each if they are black, Latinx, or LGBTQ. If you're Asian or white and you're homeless, you don't qualify for this program, and you won't be paid to be homeless, essentially,
You
what
guys,
people are
Well,
arguing.
Luke,
You ever
we
see that
can't
s-
afford not to do that.
You ever see that South Park with the homeless people?
Yes.
Yes.
That's like what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be like people, they're going to be walking outside, and it's going to be people everywhere. What really, oh man, it really grinds my gears.
Let me hear it.
Gravel Institute.
Oh my gosh.
They tweeted like, for every homeless person, there's 30 empty homes.
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever.
we've talked about this.
And
This
I'm
is so
like-
stupid.
so immature.
These guys who run this are probably like they're in their early 20s.
Yeah.
They have no concept of economics. It's just like some dude sitting there, like we talk about it all the time. Some little kid going like, capitalism is so stupid. Like, if you have an empty house and like a homeless person, just put the person in the house. And then the adult in the room was like, and who will pay for the maintenance of that building and the bills and the water and fix damage and prevent fires and make sure the building doesn't fall down on the man? And what happens? What will he eat? Where will he sleep? What do
I
you do?
think-
You put him in a building? Do you buy him clothes? Do you get him furniture? Do you get him a job? What does he eat? What do you do? No. That argument is sweeping people under the rug so that these uppity liberals in New York don't have to look at these people.
Yeah.
Scumbags.
Well,
They're in
yeah,
hotels right now.
The problem with homelessness is not the fact that there is a lack of housing or that these people don't have places to stay. Often it's an issue with addiction or serious mental illness problems. And I think that's horrible. I believe we need to do everything we can with private charity. And even if private charity isn't capable of handling it, then some kind of social safety net outside of the private charity, maybe something government funded, though I'm very reluctant. I would say this, though. It's clear that it's not as if these people are all just thrown out of their houses. And it also goes to show that I think a lot of people on the left just don't talk to homeless people or poor people. One of the first things a homeless person will tell me when I speak with them, and this is a very common theme, especially among homeless men, which most homeless people are, is don't do drugs, don't mess around with alcohol, almost all the time. And they'll tell me that they screwed their lives up with this. Not always, but it's a pretty common theme. And so my heart goes out to them. I think we need to do what we can as a society to help those people, but it's clearly not an issue of these people just not accessing housing. It's that they have serious problems where they cannot take care of themselves in many instances. And just putting them in an empty house doesn't solve that.
Well, another thing we have to really calculate here is the rise of the mental health crisis, which has been not only exacerbated, but keeps dramatically increasing by the year. If you look at the levels of anxiety, depression, self-harm,
Yeah.
psychological disorders, all of them are up dramatically, and they continue to go up, and there's nothing that is helping the number of cases, the number of mentally ill people going down. It's only a trajectory that has been going up and will continue to go up, and with that will become more problems that I don't know. Private charity I don't think will help solve the problem. I think that's very optimistic thinking, to say the least.
I'm certainly not saying that we're going to eliminate homelessness ever.
Yeah, how can we deal with this problem? I mean, it's also very hard, because how do you help someone who is not well in the head? Obviously, if someone is well-meaning and has a string of bad luck, I mean, obviously, family members and communities and neighborhoods, if someone is a good person, should go out there and help them.
Yes.
Not always do they, but they should. But also not always do the people who are going through problems want to be helped, or
That's very
that
true.
help
That's
will
very
actually
true.
cause more damage and problems for them. And there's also that aspect of it. So this is a problem that you can't have a one definitive solution for. But one of the definitive conclusions is that whenever the government intervenes, it makes the problem that much worse, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, almost always. What I would say is mostly agree with all that. These problems have to be solved on a very, very local level, and you sort of hint at that when you talk about all of these cases being different. Almost at the level of the individual is how it has to be approached. But small communities have to be doing what they can to take care of the homeless that are there or try to solve that issue. This isn't something that could even conceivably be handled on the federal level or probably even the state level.
A lot of
You're
homeless
just
people want to be
You're
homeless.
too removed. There's a certain contingency for sure.
I would say that in my experience, almost every single homeless person I encountered chose to be homeless.
Yep.
That's not been my experience.
I worked for a homeless shelter, a
Yeah.
network of them.
So-
and when the vans would come pull up to a homeless person and say, you have an option, you have several options. We can give you supplies, we can bring you to a temporary shelter, or we can apply for a long-term shelter and find you work. You know what they would say? No.
Yeah, that's very
That's it.
sad.
That's
That's
it.
very sad.
Almost every single time. The van would come back empty. They just don't want to. They don't want to go to the shelter.
Yeah, and
Sometimes they would go in for a shower for a night and just leave and never come back, or come back once a month for a quick cleanup, which is, I guess, it's still a good thing. It's good the shelters are providing that, but the overwhelming majority, like in my experience, it was almost every single instance.
yeah, I mean,
No.
I've definitely known homeless people who were seeking shelter, but I don't doubt that was your experience at all.
Yeah. Yeah, man, and that's what really bothers me about the modern left that we have, and maybe this is always the case. It's because you've got the exploitative class, which is the Democrats. They see how stupid and naive and ignorant people can be. They target those who are the least experienced, like they want 16-year-olds to vote. Why? Because 16-year-olds have no grasp of history.
Yep.
A 16-year-old doesn't remember the banking crisis. A 16-year-old today is going to be like, I have no idea what happened in 2008. It's
Well,
like, okay, you were barely alive at that point. You were, only a couple years old. So yeah, they have no idea. Then the Democrats, who are in their 80s, can propose insane things to extract value and continue to destroy and erode this country. It's just the stupidest thing in the world. These are people who, and with all due respect, 16-year-olds, hey, could be very smart, don't have the experience, but don't have the memory because they weren't alive. Like when we talk with these leftists who are in their 20s, they're like, I don't remember Occupy Wall Street. I was 10. It's like, okay, well, that's really important context for what's happening. If you want to understand how we got Donald Trump, you got to go back to 2008. If you don't even remember Occupy Wall Street, then you don't remember the economic crisis. Then I'm sorry, man. Like, you are out of this conversation. Yeah. The problem is these people are part of the political process and they have no idea what's going on. But let me tell you what they do.
Can I just throw something about voting? Once upon a time in this country, you had to be 21 to vote. And early on in our history, you were out taking care of yourself by the time you were 16. Yeah. So you had several years of life experience before you were ever able to vote. And now kids still aren't ready to live life and provide for themselves by the time they're 18 and they're voting. And people want to walk that back to 16. It's completely insane.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.